Hey, it's me again, Jabber Ganem. Welcome to another episode of Noah, of studying the Old Testament, and we're in the final part of this chapter of these chapters that the Jews call Parsha HaNoach, the Book of Noah, basically. And we're in chapters 9, 10, 11. Yesterday we ended up on the story of the ark, the family of Noah getting out of the ark, and a new covenant being established. Well, the covenant being renewed with Noah, but this covenant is for all the descendants of Noah. And we talked about the Noahic covenant. What I was reading after I finished recording the previous one, I was very excited because I remembered something written by the philosopher Baruch Spinoza about the story of the rainbow. And remember, I talked about the rainbow, the seven colors, what they signify. But Baruch Spinoza inspired another metaphor in me, and that is, we talked a lot about berit, about covenant, about this concept of cutting. And that's what the word berit means in its Semitic origin. And, I talked about the rainbow, being there in the sky as a separator. It's also the metaphor that some people have used was God is hanging his, has waged war in the world, has cleansed the world, and now he's hung his bow in the skies, as a sign that there is peace. But I also thought of this metaphor. Baruch Spinoza was a lens maker, and you know what happens when light goes through lenses. And this is an Isaac Newton experiment, his famous experiment where he dissected light into the colors, that compose light. And I thought, wow, how wonderful! We're talking about the light refracting through water and breaking into its colors, into the rainbow. So the light of Christ refracting through water, the water of life, and that is a sign of covenant. Lots of rich symbolism there, at least for me. So we talked about that. We talked about the rainbow, and now we're talking about the sons of Noah and what happened to them. And then we have this genealogy. So we have this genealogy of all the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Japheth. And this genealogy is very special to me because first I want everyone to bookmark this genealogy, because if you want to understand the geopolitics and the geography of the ancient world and where people come from, do not skim through this genealogy. This is very important. So if you want, just bookmark it, because I'm going to be referring to it very frequently in the future. But it's also very special to me because as an Arab, as a descendant of Shem, as a descendant of Noah, I look at this and I'm thinking, yeah, these are my people. But there is a character that shows up here, and they're talking about in chapter 10. The genealogy goes through all of these nations, but it singles out this one person, Nimrod. Nimrod is a name that in a Semitic root means the rebel. And in the scriptures, it talks about him as being a mighty man who is a scary man, but he's still in the hands of God. So this rebel, this guy, is the father of Assyria. Now, if you remember your Old Testament, Assyria is a nation that will terrorize and terrify the ancient world for centuries afterwards, and it will enslave the Israelites. So that's why one reason why Nimrod is meriting a special mention, the one person, a descendant of all of these nations, he's meriting a mention. But he's also a sign his rebellion is a sign of things to come. That, though there is harmony and peace on the earth now, uh, things are about to go bad again. And so we go through in chapter 10. We go through this genealogy, this geopolitical map, if you wish. And then in chapter 11, the final chapter in this segment, in this parsha Hanoach, all the people of the world are speaking one language, one tongue, and in Arabic at least, and I believe in Hebrew, when you say they are speaking one language, these are the words, the vocabulary, the lexicology, whatever you call it, that you're uttering, the communication, the means of communications. But there is also one tongue, one language, one tongue. And that means that it's akin to having one heart and one mind. And so we have these people, and all of a sudden, humans, as always, were up to no good eventually. They discovered this new technology. So they discovered this new technology, and their first inclination apparently is to build a tower. But it's really not a tower, and I'll come back to this point in a minute. They are in this place called Bab-el. Bab-el means the gate of God, the gate of God. And they basically wanted to build a gate to reach God, to become as mighty as God, probably. And so they build this Magdal. Now that is what we usually call the tower. That's what's been translated. That's what's been portrayed in art as a tower. But the word isn't really tower. The word is, even though some Hebrew dictionaries and the Young Dictionary says, in the translation it means tower, the word used is Magdal. And Magdal in Arabic and in ancient Hebrew means a well-built castle, a well-built palace. That's what it means, which reminds me of Lehi in the Book of Mormon, when he sees in a dream a big and spacious building. So that is a Magdal. That is a Magdal. That's what the people are building. But apparently it must have been something intended to be tall and high, and that's why it's been translated as a tower, because they wanted to reach heavens and be as God. But they couldn't, because God still has to descend to them. He still has to go down. Apparently that tower wasn't close enough. And what does the Lord, what does God cause to happen? He causes their language to be confused, and this is the poetry in this whole story. From Bab-el, the gate of God, to Balal, he causes balal on them, and balal means to confuse. It's in both Arabic and Arabic we say bal, and the word itself has a music to it that is, sort of a music to it that indicates nonsense or a nonsensical sound. So they are scattered because they can't speak the same language anymore. And that's where that story ends. There is this the beginnings. There is Nimrod, there is Babylon, and there is all this peace. This peace is being lost from the earth. And now, in chapter 11 and verse 10, it zooms in on Shem, the father of the Semite, my grandfather to the nth degree, Shem, the man with a name, whose name means he will have a name, he will be famous, he will have a lot of posterity. And then we have, remember, Noah blessed Shem with a special blessing after the incident of cursing Canaan. He blessed Shem, and we look at this. Now remember, when God had the flood on the earth, he said what? He said, My spirit will not be in man anymore, so man will stop living above 120 years of age. Now, what's happening here, we see this genealogy of Shem and Shem's descendants. We see that they are living 400 years, and they are having all of these children. Now, and the children are living for way beyond the 120 years. Now, as I said in an earlier episode, these long years of living is an indication of righteousness. So this is the author of this genealogy is trying to show that Shem and his descendants were righteous people, because we are towards the end, we get to this character whose name is Terah. And Terah is a name that means wanderer. And so Terah has 3 children, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And a tragedy strikes the house of Terah. We don't have the details of it, but his son Haran, who by order seems to be the youngest, dies. And so immediately Terah, the wanderer, probably wanderer because he didn't want to stay where his son died, and I'm going to address when we talk about Abraham and talk about the book of Abraham. We're going to talk a little bit more about the story of Abraham and link it back to this. But at least according to Genesis, there is this tragedy, and he leaves. He leaves with his son Abram, and Abram, the word Ab means father of, and Ram means elevated. So the literal translation, or high, the literal translation of the name Abram means elevated father. Now this root Ram reminds me of, in the Book of Mormon, it reminds me of the word Ramiyomtum, which, if you remember, it was a high elevated tower that people stood on to preach. So here we have Abram, elevated father. A very special character, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about him this week. Now, Terah leaves with his family, and they go with Sarai the princess, whose name will later be Sarah, and which still means princess, and they leave. And they leave the land of the Chaldeans, and they go to Canaan. Now, here is the thing. If you remember, Noah cursed Canaan, son of Ham, specifically Canaan. He cursed him that he will be, and that's what I said earlier. The name Canaan means he will be humiliated, he will be humbled by Shem, by Japheth. So now the descendants of Shem are heading back to the land of the Canaanites, and that is a sign of they are going back to claim to fulfill this sort of prophecy of subduing the Canaanites, of taking land, which we know doesn't happen immediately, but that's the beginning of the fulfillment of that prophecy. So that's all I have for this segment. My challenge to you is to think about covenants. Now, before I even talk about Abraham, and the Abrahamic covenant, I will do a quick segment where I will talk about covenants and agreements and those sort of things in the ancient Near East and what they mean, the nature of these agreements, because many of the things that we will see in the Abrahamic covenants, many of the things that are reflected in the Noahic covenant, many of the things in the new everlasting covenant are sort of reflected in ancient Near Eastern traditions, but that's a topic of a different segment preceding talking about Abraham. Thank you so much.